And we're live. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the Oxford University Italian Society. This afternoon, we have the honor to host Bloomberg's journalist, Chiara Albanese. Good afternoon, Chiara.
Hi.
Chiara is Italy's government correspondent for Bloomberg News. Her pieces are particularly focused on the Italian government, economics, and the energy and infrastructure sectors. Before returning to Rome with Bloomberg, she wrote from London for the Wall Street Journal, for Sole 24 Ore, for Corriere della Sera, and for financial journals in the UK. So this afternoon, we will have a chat with Chiara Albanese on her career, and there will also be and there it will also be possible to ask questions from you, the audience. So please feel free to leave your questions below during our conversation, and if there are any, I will be very happy to read them out loud. So I guess thank you very much, Chiara, for joining us, and the stage is yours. So let's start from the first question. Could you tell us a bit more about what you do in your life and what you write about, etc.?
Let me just, I think that, okay. Can you hear me well? Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
So basically, I cover Italian politics from Rome, which means that I really need to try and denoise what is happening in Italy. And like, I guess some of you are Italians, some of you are not, but basically try and translate all the small continuous noise of what is happening in the Italian political environment and atmosphere, and make sure that this is like translated and written in a clear way for people that are mostly outside Italy or are in Italy, but they don't have time because they work maybe in the financial sector or in a company, and they just want to have clear, simple, factual, actionable news that will impact what they do. So that's basically my main job.
And how difficult is it to explain Italian politics to foreigners? And in English, I assume as well. How difficult is it? Sometimes I try to do it here in the UK, but even some terminology is just really hard to translate and find. So just give us
Yeah,
your.
look, this is a great question because like everyone, like we're born in a country and we kind of grow up and we understand some things and we take them for granted. But in each country, you have like some strange routines and facts. And in the UK, I guess is the same. Like you know how things work because you're familiar with them, but you just take them for granted. So it is fun. It is nice. It makes you think a lot when you have to write it in English, keeping in mind a very different audience. I think this is a very useful exercise. Like, I've been doing that for some years now, so it has become easier. But I think it's also useful. It would be useful for Italian journalists as well to try sometimes and write for like a different audience. It would kind of teach them how to, let's say, translate or immediately understand what things are about, what matters and what doesn't.
And what was, let's say, what was the hardest, thing to explain? I don't know if it exists. It's a bit of a niche question. What was really hard to explain to foreigners about Italian politics, if you have something particular in mind?
Well, a recent example was, for example, the presidential vote in Italy. Like it was like super big moment for the Italian, like for Italian politics, for the country, like who is going to be the next president. Big drama. There was like just before the now Russia and Ukraine have like taken over the world, but there was just before, so like no one was worrying too much about the war. So there was a big focus, but it was hard to understand for people outside Italy why that was so important, right? Because since from the start, the main option was actually having like either Mario Draghi becoming president or Mattarella remaining as president, and both options were seen as decent, as good for Italy. So it was very hard to understand why should we worry about it, and also why Mario Draghi was not elected was a big question mark. Like, how do you explain that? What was the issue there? And it was very hard to explain that, like, the voters are lawmakers that are not perfectly aligned sometimes with party leaders. So there was like definitely the biggest
Yeah,
story
I think we lost
in
you for a
Italy for
second.
like more than a week. But for Bloomberg, we didn't write many stories. We wrote like one big piece a day, and that was it. Very simple, very plain, very factual.
Can you hear me fine?
I can now. I think I couldn't
You
see you
just
for a
interrupt.
while.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It just cut off for a second, but we're back. So that's fine. I think we understood almost everything, so that's good. And so are there many similarities between Italian politics and British politics? Because of course we're in the UK now. We look at Italian politics. You were here a while ago, so what similarities are there? You know, about the mechanisms, about how communication works, etc.
I think it's interesting because very much in Italy, as in the UK, is very linked to the political characters that you have from time to time. So the prime ministers like are the most relevant point of focus in both countries, and sometimes you basically associate everything with the person. Like in Italy now, like you have Mario Draghi, and you assume that everything is fine, the country is safe, in good hands. In the UK, you have Boris Johnson, and everything is associated with him, with the Brexit process, and so on. While in fact, there is like a long list of layers below it in which like decisions are actually taken, and this is also very interesting. So I think there is kind of a simplification or a personification of politics that you have in both countries.
And do you know when we talk about journalism and communication, what's the difference between how politicians communicate in Italy to their, you know, voters or to people who would like that to vote for them, etc., and how they do it? How do you manipulate consent in Italy, and how do you do it in the UK? Is it the same thing?
Well, I'm not sure that like we need to talk about manipulation of like consent, especially when you talk about the elections. You know, like elections take place each like some several years, but then like the money, sorry, the power is divided up between people, and with like power games mostly in parliament, in company roles and so on. So I think actually is mostly about how decisions are actually taken, and without the direct election of like or voter or like expression of interest of the population. This is interesting. I think also there is a big difference though between the UK and Italy in terms of media. In Italy, the media is very polarized in most cases, and also there is a bit of crossover between like opinion and reporting. The biggest Italian newspapers sometimes cross the line, and they kind of report as facts their opinion, while in the UK, and this is very similar to the Anglo-Saxon world, also in the US, the media is actually very clear in how they are defined. So if you buy or read like a neutral newspaper or a media source like the BBC, for example, you know you're gonna find or read about facts, and every word and every detail is going to be particularly fact checked.
Right. So I assume when you write on Bloomberg, you'll have to adopt the second method for sure. Um, so in 1994, in Italy, we had Forza Italia, and if I'm not wrong, hopefully not. And in about 2012, we had this big explosion of the Five Star Movement. So it looks like periodically there's some, you know, new party or new movement or new form of, you know, aggregating people that rises up and gets consent. what's gonna happen next? So, what do you think is gonna be the next, big movement in Italy?
Yeah, this is very interesting. Look, I think this is not only happening in Italy, right? We know that populism is comes and goes in waves, but that happens everywhere, like in every country. We had that in the UK, we had that in the US with Trump, we had like in other European countries as well. Look, I genuinely think that what is happening right now in Ukraine is going to change those dynamics for a while, because there is a war, and this is going to be a lasting impact. I think also in the easiness or the let's say the periodic rise of populist parties and extremist parties. I might be wrong because we're still like in the early stages of what is going on, but I think we are kind of in a situation in which after which, as in particular as European citizens, we're gonna want some reassurances about our leaders. And so I think the population overall is going to be less open to just um, go or back or vote a leader that is not, let's say, trusted. Five Star, they were like, they got a lot of votes, but then it was kind of quick, the way in which they kind of lost consensus. But also, like, they were led at the beginning um, by a comic, and I don't think that would happen right now. I think people really are looking for more trusted leaders. I think this is something that is kind of being changed at the roots of the society in these weeks and months.
And so, do you think maybe the well, really unfortunate and obviously extremely sad war that is happening will have an impact on how many people go out and vote, because currently we have a problem in Italy about how many people go and vote, and it is now it's usually under 50% of the voters that go out and do so, which is of course a problem for our democracy. Do you think that could impact this positively, or?
Yeah, look, I really think so. I think people are going to, like, institutions and the political class and the electoral system are going to come out from what we're living right now in a different way. And I think people really will want to have a say about their life after what is happening at the moment. So, also the trust in, like, the European Union, but also like the NATO alliance, like uh, pan countries alliances, is going to become much stronger with what is happening. So again, I really think that this is going to change our awareness of being able to vote. And this has been an issue, as you say, in Italy, but in other countries as well, right? We've seen that with referendums. Like, people sometimes take their right for granted. I don't think that is going to be the case anymore for a long time.
And so, again, just to touch back on Ukraine, obviously, we're currently extremely concerned about the current situation, and on my behalf, extremely sad and concerned about people there as well, not just about, political scenarios, but also about human lives. Um, what do you think will happen? Obviously, you cannot predict what will happen, and we're not gonna go against you in the near future if what you say is wrong. But I mean, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not, not only no one knows, but I'm in particular not particularly able or skilled to say what is going to happen from a military point of view. But what we can already see, and is going to have a long lasting impact, is how much our, like, relationships between countries are going to change, because there was a trust that was given for granted that among some countries you don't basically bombard another one, and this has been destroyed. And also, like, the energy market has been changed forever because Russia was at the center of it, and, like, countries are rushing and scrambling to find alternatives, and those are changes that take months to be done, and clearly they will take other years to be undone. So even if Russia were to stop any bombardment tomorrow and say, oh, sorry, that was a mistake, those changes have already started to take place and they will not be undone. And also, like, we need to be aware that we are going to create more debt to finance what is going on. Countries are going to be poorer and they're going to struggle. So the impact will kind of be felt for years to come. And clearly, like, the biggest impact is on Ukraine and the country and what is going on there. But I think, like, the whole world is going to have some changes that are going to be structural. And one of those is also going to be, like, as you were saying, our awareness of we need to, like, we are in charge of our decisions.
Right. Thank you for your answer. So now let's move on to more personal question. So what did you study in order to become a journalist and to have such a successful career path, even if you're really young? And so Gavetta, what did you have to do to reach this point, and why did you decide to become a journalist? So 3 questions in one.
5 in 1. Well done, Julia. No, I think, look, to become a journalist, I always kind of knew I wanted to be a journalist, probably for the wrong reasons, because I thought it was like a way to write, and I liked writing and reading. While it is not about reading and writing, it's more about understanding the world and explaining it. But, like, using different means is not about writing anymore. But you have, like, also on this point, you have 2 different ways in which you can become a journalist, and the UK and Italy are very different. So in Italy, you have to let's simplify it a bit, but you have to use your personal connections to get a job, while in the UK you use, like, the standard, let's apply for the job and do an interview and try if we can do it. So I studied economics in Italy, and then I started working immediately after, even before my graduation. So I started really young, and after that, I decided that I wanted to study a bit more and move to the UK, and this is where I actually got my first real jobs, and that was done very simply by applying for a job posting and then doing an interview and, like, being hired. And from there I moved, like, jobs, but always being in international media organizations, and that really means that it's about your applications, it's about your interests, it's about your doing hard work rather than using personal connections. So I've done, like, a career that could be similar to one you do in a company, rather than one you do, like, in an Italian newspaper, in which you kind of phone up your dad's best friend that now has a cousin that works at the newspaper. And unfortunately, in Italy, this is still very much the case to be a journalist.
Right. Thank you, even for this really insightful answer. And so, in our previous interviews, we've followed different trends and patterns, but one of them was interviewing women in STEM, and in particular, of course, Italian women in STEM. Of course, you're not a woman in STEM. uh, but again, today is the 8th of March, so happy International Women's Day to everyone.
In particular.
And did you encounter any additional difficulties because you were a woman in your career, or did it all went smooth?
Look, to be honest, no. I've very often worked in my career in many jobs with, like, under other women. So in several cases, my managers were women. I never had, like, issues internally because I was a woman. It happened a few times, but it happened to every woman. that, for example, you go to a job interview, to a physical interview to speak with a source or a minister or a CEO of a company, and if you go with a male colleague, at immediately you become number two, even if you're peers, and that has happened. Like, it's something you take for granted if you are a woman and you work in in the Italian society, in the Italian space. That would happen in any company. I never had like a real issue though. I think in Italy, in the media, like there are a lot of successful journalists, and it is not. It's hard to say we're discriminated. Is in different sectors that there is like a more visible discrimination. For example, you see that in politics. Like, we never had a woman prime minister, we never had a woman president, we never had women in like very senior roles, and that really stands out as something that needs to change.
It does. I must confess, it definitely does. And on a personal note, it was a bit disheartening when, again, we didn't get a woman as a president of the republic. I must confess. Um, After all that, chit chat about having a female president and a female without a face, but just a woman as a president, they didn't manage. And
Do you think it is different in the UK though, like the women's situation? Like, if you are like a 30 years old woman in a career, you are considered in a different way. I mean, I'm curious about your experience as well.
so I'm unsure because I'm not in my 30s, and I haven't had a successful career yet. But I study mathematics, which is a really male-dominated sector.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but there is a particular attention, at least in my case, about um, diversity and inclusion, and what, for example, the maths department can do in order to enhance the performances of female undergraduates. So when in examiners' reports we see that females score lower than their male counterparts, then there's a conversation about that, which is, it's not that we ignore the data. Um, while it just looks like in Italy we kind of do in a sense, and it should definitely be changed. Um, and what I also find, and now I want your opinion, what we also find is I find a bit disheartening, is that um, usually the females that go ahead in their political career are right-wing females, which is a bit of a contradiction apparently. I mean, it isn't, of course, but it could look like one.
Yeah.
So Metsola, and then we had Alberti Casellati. I mean, of course, she got butchered in her Miss election as president of the Republic, but still, Thatcher in the UK, or Theresa May, uh, we, there's a problem of female representation in the left wing areas, I think. What do you think about it?
Yeah, that's a very very good point. Though I must say, I think I still kind of think this is mostly by chance rather than a real kind of trend. But it's true, like generally speaking, probably if you are in a right wing party, you might be tempted to be a bit more aggressive in your statements, in your stances, and you're taken more seriously. In Italy, it's true. Like, at the moment, if you need to look for powerful women, or like, I wouldn't even like say powerful, but um, it's mostly at the right. It's interesting, but I would still say this is just by chance.
Right. This is interesting because of course there are different opinions about this. We'll see how it
Yeah.
goes in the future. uh, Clearly there is a problem about female representation anyway. Um, and so, I mean, I guess thank you so much, Chiara, for your answers. We have a last question for you, but if the audience has any questions, please,
Sure.
please feel free to just leave a comment. For the moment, we have none. Apparently, my questions have
Fine.
been enough. So yeah, if the audience has any questions, please just leave a comment below and I'll read it out loud. Otherwise, I'll go on with my final question and we'll see if we get some extra questions. So you have started a new podcast, Politics, that
everyone is curious about podcasts nowadays.
I think they're great. I listen to podcasts on a daily basis. I think you can listen to podcasts when you do your daily activity, when you make a coffee, or
Yeah.
when you write something. So I think in general they're great. So you started again, yeah, politics for the Post, Il Post journal with Francesco Costa, and where you try to explain Italian politics to Italians in this case. So is it easier to explain Italian politics to
You
Italians?
know, like, not really, because you really need to understand more granularity if you have to discuss something and explain something. And when you record the podcast, you really have to understand what you're going to discuss, because then you need to speak out loud about it. But what I think it's most challenging is that it's hard to document yourself, and to find the original source of what you want to explain, because it is hard to find objective reports in the Italian media about what is going on. So it is hard to, like, say we want to discuss reforms, which is something we discussed a lot in the podcast. It's hard to find sufficient articles and just say, okay, this is where it all started, this is what we need to discuss. It's very challenging. So to be honest, for me, it has been a great exercise, and I'm very grateful to Post and to all, like, my colleagues for like getting me this opportunity, because it's really useful. And also, it, like, sometimes you assume that Italians understand about politics more, and that my challenge was just because I was writing for an international audience. But actually, everyone is very confused about Italian politics in Italy and abroad, and that was really funny to find out, to be honest.
And obviously doing a podcast is something, well, it's still journalism, but it's something very different to what we think a journalist does. Obviously, I assume it's I assume it must be something new for you. Do you prefer it to like writing articles
I
or
really like it. I think it complements each other. Like, nowadays, a journalist should really use all platforms available. It's video, it's interviews, it's writing, it's social media, it's a bit of everything. So you really need to, like, it's not easy, because you need to have different languages and different skills for each of those areas. But I think that's really the beauty of the job. It's not about I write, you do a podcast, and the other guy does TV. Is we do a bit of everything all together, to be honest.
fair enough. I have the last question from the audience, and then I know Chiara has to rush
Sure.
away. So Stefano says, where do you see chance of changing in Italy?
Okay. Which change you mean? I guess we discussed a lot about politics, and, like, women representation. So I would assume that's the question. But if you want to clarify, please do. Um, I think a lot has already changed in Italy, and sometimes the political class and our legal system does not reflect yet how much our society has changed. So our generation, and, like, I assume ours more or less, but, like, people from their 20s to 40s today are, like, much ahead of our political class in terms of, like, where we belong, and we feel all European. And I include the UK in Europeans, to be honest. In that case, it's just a Western culture and sense of belonging, and we work very hard. I don't think this. I think the situation in which, like, there is a big division of labor in families and society is also changed in reality. Politically, still very discussed, but at practical level is almost gone. So I think that is a matter of having the political class adapting to how much and how quickly the society is changing, rather than the opposite.
Right. Um, Thank you so much, Chiara, for your answers and your insightful comments.
It was
And
a real pleasure.
I hope that soon we'll be able to have you in Oxford, perhaps. And
Of course.
so until then, thank you very much again, and I wish you a very pleasant rest of your day. And I'd like to say thanks to the following people. I would like to say thanks to Alessandra De Manuele, our secretary and treasurer, our press officers, and our sponsors. And finally, I would like to say thank to the audience for joining us this afternoon, and just follow us to keep updated on our future events. So thank you very much to
Thank you very
everyone, and
much.
good day.
Thank you. Keep it up. Bye bye.